And the reading today comes from Matthew chapter 25, starting at verse 14, the parable of the talents. Again, it would be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Morning. It's lovely to see you. For those who don't recognise me, it's because I've got my clerical outfit on. The scruffy one. Seen and noted, James. So, seriously, my name's Paul. I'm the other one of the ministers here at Immanuel, and it's a real privilege to be able to speak today. Before we start, let's have a little bit of a quiz. We've watched the television. I've certainly watched the television a lot over the last couple of days, and learned some things about Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. So let's see how much you've been paying attention. There's a few questions throughout this talk today. Can anyone tell me when she was born? No, don't shout out. This is Joshy. Yes, we got a date. When do we send our birthday cards? Although technically that would be twice. Her official birthday, her actual birthday. 21st of April. Yeah, 21st of April 1926. Good answer. Well done. You've been paying attention. So, Queen Elizabeth was born not to be queen. Originally, that was not her natural line of succession. But she had a sister. What was the sister's name? Oh, there's a general murmuring. You don't get this whole don't shout out thing, do you? I'm looking for Jessica. Margaret, do you know the middle name? It has been, they've spoken a lot about it, actually, which I didn't realise until I've been watching the television. Jenny. Margaret Rose, yes. Okay, when did she become queen? Jackie. Do you know the date? When did... Sorry, you got the February. What date in February? 12th? No, it wasn't. It was a little bit earlier than that. 6th of February, 1952. Okay, but a little bit more recent. So there was a year that she described in a talk as her annus horribilis. Her castle in Windsor burnt down. The family went through a series of marriage breakups, and just life was a bit rubbish. What year was that? Ooh. Go on then, Simon. It was 1992, her annus horribilis. This is a bit more tricky, because actually the television have been making just wild guesses at this, but I've done a little bit of research and found out how many countries did she visit during her life. Well, that's more tricky. I'm looking at our quizzers, Penny and Martin, and they don't even know. No, it wasn't a bad guess, but no, there's a few more than that. She visited 117 countries. Kids, how many prime ministers did she have serving her throughout her life? Joshie again. How much? How many did you say? Better be confident. 15. Yeah, that's the right answer. She had 15 prime ministers. Well, while we're on a roll, who was the first? Oh, come on, probably the most... Sorry? Winston Churchill. Who's the last? Sorry? Liz Truss, that's right. Just. So, during her life, she met all of the serving US presidents, with the exception of one. Who was that? It was. She never met Lyndon Johnson. There we go. So, just a few general knowledge quizzes about Queen Elizabeth. So, we've come to the end of the second Elizabethan era at the passing of our Queen. And we now have a new king. And I've been really interested on social medias. I've seen a lot of the stuff that's been put on by different people, and this phrase has been repeated numerous times at the passing of Elizabeth. And it's, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So, who said these words first of all? Bethia. Jesus, we just had it read to you. I mean, you've literally just had it read to you. Keith read it really well. It's because he's a teacher. Good, well done, good and faithful servant, in a parable that Jesus told. Jesus told lots of parables. He told stories. As we looked at a couple of weeks ago, narrative is really important. It's the thing that defines humanity. We love stories, we love narratives, and I'm sure we all have our favourite story about the Queen. And this one's mine because I think, you probably all heard it, but it's my favourite story because I think it shows that the Queen did not take herself too seriously. She took her role incredibly seriously, but she didn't take herself too seriously. So, as we all know, the Queen had her favourite house in Windsor, and if you've been to Windsor, you'll know that Windsor Great Park surrounds the castle, and she'd go walking around there. But if she was on horseback, she would go riding by herself. If she was going walking, she would be escorted by her protection officer, Royal Protection Officer. And the Royal Protection Officer was interviewed during the last Jubilee about what his favourite story was. And he said, well, this, because it says something of the nature of the Queen that we don't see, and almost her sort of impish spirit. So the Queen and her Royal Protection Officer walking through Windsor Great Park, and these two American tourists came up and started a conversation with them. First, I think the fact that the Queen stops and engages with them, I think, says something about her character. But they said, "Oh, do you live round here?" And she said, "Well, no, I live in London, but I do have a little home just over the hill." And they said, "Oh, have you been coming here for long?" And she said, "Oh, I've been coming here ever since I was a child." And they thought, "Oh." They said, "Well, if you've been coming here that long, you must have met the Queen." And so she says, "No, I've never met her, but he meets her regularly." So the Americans all of a sudden take a great interest in the protection officer. And they say, "Can we take a photo with you? Give the camera to the Queen and go and put their arms around the protection officer and have a photo with him." The Queen thinks this. I think she must think this is hilarious. Anyway, the Royal Protection Officer said, "Oh, well, while you're here, why don't you have a photo with her?" So they go and he takes a picture of them with the Queen. Anyway, and they just duly clear off. And the Queen, once they've gone out of sight, the Queen says, "I'd love to be a fly on the wall when they show those pictures to their friends and they realise who it was." I thought, yeah, how great is that? How great is that? He's completely oblivious. And I think it shows that she didn't take herself too seriously, but she does take her role, or did take her role, very, very seriously. So the teaching that we heard earlier, these phrases, "Well done, good and faithful servant," come from a parable that Jesus taught. And because it comes from a parable, I think there's a reflection on it when we hear these words given and said about our Queen and the nature of her life. I think there's something that we can learn from it because it's teaching of Jesus, and therefore there's value in it for us as well. So a couple more quiz questions. Whose motto is in Latin, so I should translate into English. Whose motto is serve to lead? Whose motto is that? Any guesses? Royal families? No. Will that make any difference then, James? It's the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. Serve to lead. Whose is this? To serve and not to be served. No, you'd think it's not. No. But good guess. And not too far. You're travelling in the right direction, Emma. But anyone? Last guess? No. It's actually the motto for the RAF Chaplains Department: to serve and not to be served. Why have I told you that? I think because these organisations these two mottos come from organisations that are inherently they're looked at as really autocratic, very hierarchical, and with positions of authority, very regulated positions of authority. And yet in these mottos, they make a statement about the nature of leadership. The Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, for many, many years now, has trained our British Army officers on the premise that they serve to lead, that leadership and service are intrinsically linked. And actually, that's a biblical principle. It's a biblical principle which I think our Queen understood. It was said of the Queen that duty was put before everything. James has already told you this in his opening prologue this morning, that duty was put before everything else in the eyes of the Queen. It was put before her family. It was put before herself, everything. Why was this? Why was duty the most important thing for her? I think it comes down to this single point. She perceived her role as sovereign to be something that was given to her, a role that was given to her by God. It was a vocation, it was a calling, and it was a ministry that God had appointed her. And she was a committed Christian. You didn't have to listen to too much of what she said every Christmas to realize that her Christian faith was singularly the most important thing in her life. Yesterday on the television, when I got home, I was watching an interview that was done by the previous Dean of Westminster Abbey, who has actually retired to Chichester. He now works in St George's Wick. He was saying that when the year 2000 was rolling through, and it was the time for the Queen's Christmas message, she said to the Dean of Westminster, she said, on this year specifically, I really want to focus on the message of Jesus. 2,000 years after his birth. Okay, that's probably not entirely true, but we all thought that's how it works. She said, I really want to focus on the message of Jesus. It was singly the most important thing to her. And so it's no wonder that when she understood her duty to be an outworking of the calling that God had placed upon her, that it was a primacy for her in everything she did. For 70 years, she embodied her calling to serve the people. Even though she was a leader, she was the monarch. She led through service to the people of the United Kingdom and her territories. And as we've said throughout these years, she regularly spoke of her faith that she had in Jesus. And what I love about this is this humility that you see from the Queen. She recognizes, and we all know that the Queen represents our country. Everything about this country is represented in the monarch. For the whole of my working life, whether that's as a police officer, whether that's in the Church of England, whether that's in the Royal Air Force or now the British Army, at every single stage, these organizations swear allegiance not to the state. They don't swear allegiance to the government. They swear allegiance to the Queen and all her successors. She represents the country. She represents the nation. But in all this greatness, when you hear her speak every Christmas, she says, don't look at me, look at him. And to some extent, we see that in the Gospels. In not just the life of Jesus, but and the ministry of Jesus, because Jesus all the time says, "Don't look at me, look at him. Don't look at me, look at you. I only do what he does. I'm only doing what he's telling me to do, what the Father is telling I am doing." And yet you've got the other extreme where the Father is going, "Don't look at me, listen to him." That's humility. And the Queen, in all her status, just constantly pointed people to Jesus. She talked about him at Christmas when she addressed the nation. It was the driving force in her life. And we mourn the death of our Queen. We have a new king. But be sure the king has always been on the throne, is still on the throne, will always continue to be on his throne. But that king left the splendor of heaven to become a child, to make himself vulnerable, to serve, and to serve. That's the nature of leadership. It was the model that the Queen adopted, to serve and not to be served. Now, I do understand that comparison slightly breaks down in that she did not leave the splendor of her palace, and she did have staff to look after her. I get that. But she regarded her calling above her own needs and her own desires. And this should be an inspiration to us all. As Christians, as disciples of Jesus, as apprentices under him, as ones who look to him as the one who leads and guides, we should be able to get inspiration from Her Majesty the Queen, the way that she just dutifully served other people, putting other people's needs before her own, even 2 days. Now, clearly, she was frail and she was 2 days away from death. She still served the people of the country by appointing our new Prime Minister and was there to do it, to make sure her duty was done, even to the last. And we get that picture from the Bible. We are all called. We are all gifted by God with a calling that is unique to you. You may not wear the crown of the United Kingdom, but you wear a crown. And it is gifted to you by the Father, and you have a calling. And what I love about the book of Revelation is that the Queen is now in heaven with the elders who cast their crowns down before the one true King. Their authority comes from him. She knew that. She recognized that. She modeled that in her life, as Jesus modeled it in his. So we are all called with a unique calling, requiring complete obedience and always founded on love, on servanthood and faith. She has been a model, whether you're a monarchist or not. If you're a follower of Jesus, she has been a model of what it is to live a life of duty and service to others. And there is a family out there grieving her loss, as is there a country that's grieving her loss. But the beauty of the monarchy is that it continues. And so this morning we say together, God save the King. We will continue to pray for him because the Bible tells us we must. Amen.